Hi there, and a huge welcome to today's episode of Gina Gardiner and Friends. And today I'm joined by Thomas Barnes and Chido Poe. Now, Chido is the managing director of Banya, and she's just qualified as a social worker. And Thomas, he works for Banya in marketing and sales, but he was a foster child under Banya's care. And we're going to be talking today about the whole issue around foster care. But before we get started, I'd be really grateful if, Chido, if we start with you. Tell us how you come to be the managing director of Banya. What took you there?
It's been a long journey, I would say. So my mum set up Banya as a fostering agency about 27 years ago, which made me around 9 years old. And I was very much a part of her setting that up. I had younger foster brothers and sisters. So I've grown up knowing what fostering is and experiencing it as a foster sibling, and then my mum running a fostering agency. And I've always just had an interest in people.
Mhm.
So my first degree was in education. I had an interest in teaching. I had an interest in young people. And then I left uni and interesting actually set up a cleaning business. That was off the back of a course I did and didn't actually pass. So it was kind of like a building of my self-esteem. But anyway, cleaning business didn't work out. Started doing some part-time work at Banya over 10 years ago now and started off as a admin support and had a few different roles along working for Banya. So yeah, that's kind of how I got involved. I kind of had an interest from a child, explored a bit what my interests were at university and sort of work-wise outside of Banya, but just got drawn back to it. And then my mum retired about 4 years ago, and me and Dorothy took over as the directors of Banya. So yeah.
Before we go any further, and Thomas, I haven't forgotten you, but I think many people will have no idea what a fostering agency actually does. So
Yeah.
can you tell us, what is a fostering agency? What's the role you play?
So we offer a service to the local authorities to recruit foster carers for the local authorities to place children that are looked after in our care. And what we do is we ensure that we keep the children safe and that we look after the fostering families that we have with supervising social workers and just work in partnership with the local authority to try and get good outcomes for our young people in our care.
And when you talk about looked after children, you're talking about children who've been taken from their parents because it's no longer safe or suitable, and then they're being placed with a family who has decided to take them in order to look after them and to give them a home.
Yes, so there's many different reasons why children come into care, but for whatever reason it is, they will end up in the care of the local authority. And because of the shortage of foster carers, fostering agencies have come up to try and provide a service of recruiting foster carers. And the idea behind it is to try and create a family environment for the child to stay within after having to leave their family for whatever reason.
Great, thank you very much for explaining that. I think it's just important before we get started that everybody knows,
Yeah,
the
yeah,
parameters of what we're talking about.
yeah.
Thomas, your story, please, because you've already said to me that you were a child that had been placed through Banya, and then you've ended up working. So you've seen everything, the whole cycle, haven't you? I'm very interested if you'd like to share your story.
Yes, I'm more than happy to. Thank you for having me on. But my story starts, I was with I obviously living with my parents. I actually came into foster care at the age of 7 years old. I think that one thing I want to make clear is the local authorities, it's not just like an overnight decision that they remove children from their parents' care. I was on the Child Protective Services list since I was 2 years old.
Could
So
you
that's
explain what that is for our listeners? And remember that we've got a global audience.
hmm,
So the names that you use and that we use in the UK or in your area may not be meaningful to everybody. So it'd be really helpful if you could explain as you go along. That would be wonderful.
My apologies.
Yes.
The social services keep an eye on children that come may be at risk, or their safety or well-being might be at risk, and that's what the child protective list is. And social services try to look for an outcome to make sure the child stays with their parents, because that is the best outcome for any child usually. When it comes that it's not going to happen that way, then that's when the child is removed.
Okay.
And I was on that list since I was 2 years old, and I was removed when I was 7. Both of my parents were alcoholics.
Mhm.
My mother, obviously, I was neglected, and it was domestic violence in the household between my father and my mum. So that's the sad situation that I lived in till I was 7 years old. Then I was removed, and I lived with my auntie for around a year and a half, 2 years. But obviously, because of the closeness between my family and my auntie, I had to be moved out of the area from London to out of the area for my safety and protection.
Okay.
That's when I was moved into a Banya family, with Banya's care homes, not care homes, sorry, one of Banya's carers.
Okay.
And I lived with them since I was 9 years old, and I think of them as my parents. And obviously, difficult times throughout, but I'd say it was a really good experience, and it definitely was the right decision for me.
I think, people listening to this will recognize that when you'd have to take a child out of the family unit to find a place where they are going to be nurtured and they're going to be safe, that's a big decision for people to make, for the authorities to take. But having done that, and I'm interested, in Chido, your view, at what point in the proceedings do you get involved? Because presumably you're not making the decision about whether a child should be taken away. You're dealing with the aftermath of that happening, or have I got that wrong?
No, you've got it right. We're not involved in the decision making of the child being removed from a family home. And like I said, not all children that come into care are actually child protection on a child protection register. The majority are actually under something called a Section 20, which is whether the parents and the local authority work together with the child being in care. Where we do have some say about a child's, what might happen to a child is we have foster carers that are trained specifically for parent and child. So how that works is there might be a mum and a dad, or just a mum or just a dad, that are looking after their child, and the local authority want to find out more if they are capable of doing that, and if they are, what extra support they need. So they'd actually go and stay with our foster carers for 12 weeks, and the foster carers will kind of share their knowledge of parenting with the parent, and hopefully and be helping the social worker with their assessment, giving feedback on how they're doing. And the desired outcome, like Tom said earlier, is that the families stay together. But you're right. We mainly deal with children once they've come into care. The local authorities send referrals, giving us sometimes a very detailed description of the child and their experiences, and sometimes barely anything. And we have to do careful matching considerations to place this child with the most suitable fostering family that we can find. So yeah, that's kind of another role of ours within the agency.
So this matching process, is that done locally, or do children go over a wide geographical area? How does that work?
It depends on what the needs of the child are. So we try and put those first. But what we're finding again and again is there aren't enough foster carers. So I'm hoping today people may be listening in might start considering if they would do it, or they know somebody that might, because ideally there's already trauma involved with the child having to separate from their family. So it's best to usually keep them in their local community, keep them at the same school, keep them close to their doctor's surgery, keep them close to their family and friends. But we don't always find carers that are in that local community. And that's a pressure that the local authority and fostering agencies are under. But then you can get the other extreme where a child might be involved in county lines or child sexual exploitation, and getting them out of the area is actually probably for their own safety and well-being.
Can I just stop you? What's county lines for our listeners? Because they may not be familiar
Yes.
with that.
So county lines is when a child is exploited by a gang, an organized criminal gang, to sell drugs. And the reason they target young people is that police are less likely to stop young people and search them. Or if they do, they will face less criminal charges than if it was an adult.
Right.
Yeah.
And I can see then that the need to get them away from the very thing that's drawn them into that activity is so
Yeah.
important.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, all of these things are put in our matching considerations, but usually we want to keep the child in their local community, and that's for a number of reasons. It's just, yeah, to keep some sort of stability in their life while they're navigating, entering into care, you know?
It must be incredibly traumatic, even if the family circumstance is not good, for children to be taken away from what they know, their parents. What was your experience, Thomas? Can you remember? I know you were only little, you were 7, but then there was that 2-year period before you actually went with your permanent. I'm assuming you stayed with the same foster family from the age of 9. Can you remember back what that was like?
I remember it quite vividly. I was obviously, we said the majority of placements, as Chido mentioned, are Section 20. I was not in that majority. I was under a Section 47, which is a court saying, yeah, you need to get this child out of there for their safety. So my experience might be quite different than another child, but each child's experience coming into care will be different.
Of course.
And it is obviously coming into care it's worrying because you aren't living with your parents, but you're not necessarily aware of why. And
Uh-huh.
there's a lot of things going on, and you may go straight from your parents to a foster placement. And this obviously instills quite a bit of anxiety, concern, worry, lack of trust because you don't know these people,
Yes.
and everything that any bit of and that's why we tried to, with the matching process, to keep as many things, because so much is changing for them, we
Yeah.
try to keep as much the same as we can.
And were things kept the same at all for you, or were you taken completely out of your known environment?
So initially I lived with my auntie,
So
my
was that
auntie and uncle. So
local?
it was, yes, that was within London. So and I saw my parents on a regular basis as contact. But obviously, because of the closeness between my parents and my extended family, it became an unsustainable place for me to stay. And from my auntie, it was determined I moved out of area, and then I had to change schools, places, doctors, everything.
Everything. Goodness
Yeah.
me. And you know that the thought that these children are moved, it's not their fault. It's no fault of their own that they are having to go through. If they've not already been through trauma in the home, then just the very act of separation and everything being new is pretty traumatic for a child who doesn't understand. We're going to go for a short break, but when we come back, I know you said that you're always looking for foster carers. What I'd like to do is to spend the next section talking about what makes a great foster carer or foster caring family, and what are the challenges, and what actually means that it's not going to work. I'd like to really explore that from both your perspective in terms of the agency, but also, Thomas, from your point of view in terms of your experiences and the work that you do. So don't go away. We'll be back in just a minute. Welcome back. I know that the UK is very, very short of foster carers, and I know that this is not unusual in other Western countries. So what makes a great foster carer?
I would say somebody that is loving, somebody that has patience, somebody that has empathy. And I would say somebody that is willing to learn, and somebody that is willing to reflect, and somebody that is willing to put the work in to be able to look after a child in their care.
Because I suspect that, having been through quite traumatic separation and so on, these children won't necessarily be the easiest to deal with.
Well, I'm a mother myself, and I think that every child has their
It's their moments.
moments. Yes. And I think we need to be careful about some of the descriptive words that we use, because it's they a lot of the time they have been through some very traumatic events, and this will come out in their behavior.
Mhm.
And in a way, we want it to, because that's how we can learn about them and be able to offer them the support that they need.
Yes.
Yeah. And but what I would say to a foster parent is, the reason I think it's harder sometimes than being a parent is you always have to pick the higher road. You know, you can't lose your temper. You can't be snappy that day. You can't you can't think, oh, I'll just leave that for tomorrow. You really have to dedicate yourself to this child. And yes, you're a human being and you will make mistakes, and that's how you'll learn. But you really have to just keep that base of being professional whilst being a parent. That's, I think, a very difficult combination to get. But I take my hat off to foster carers. I find them truly inspiring people. And my biggest thing that I say to anybody is, I'm sure you've got a great foundation to be a foster carer. Don't ever think, oh, I wouldn't be able to do that, because you can. It's achievable. You get a lot of support as well from social workers, from agencies, and it's just a very life-changing, social, like soulful work to do.
I think that's a great way of putting it. I want to come back to the support, but before we do, Thomas,
Yeah.
what do you think makes a great foster carer? I mean, you had a successful foster placement. I don't know whether that's the right language to use, but what for you makes it successful?
It's For me personally, I think that my experience, I was very, very fortunate because I had some really amazing carers. And it's really, as I agree with everything that Chido has said, it's definitely a lot of patience and a lot of understanding, because as parents, your own child is going to show some difficult behavior, and the foster child is no different. But they are showing this difficult behavior, as well as having to manage the PTSD and trauma that they've come from of of their childhood.
Yes.
um, and they've got to manage all of this in the understanding that they are living with a set of strangers almost.
Mhm.
So
Well,
you
certainly
have
at the beginning, aren't they? They won't have ever
exactly,
met them before.
exactly. And this is how I like to, the way I see it is, imagine trying to being moved out of everything you know and trust and away from everyone you know and trust, and you have to build your life again. As even as an adult, that is terrifying.
Difficult. Yeah.
Now imagine trying to do that as a child. So this level of, understanding and empathy and kindness and openness and definitely patience, because it's not always there are going to be moments we are all human, and we will, you are provided with all the support, but it's not always going to be easy, but you will get through it. And I've never spoken to a foster child, or well, I say foster child, I've never spoken to a foster parent that says, hey, I've made a mistake choosing doing this. They've always it's such a rewarding thing. I mean, I was a successful foster placement, and because you see all the hardships these children have gone through, and then you've seen the difficult they had coming to terms with that, and then you see them go off and be, a fully fledged adult, and it's like, wow, the difference that these foster carers make. And it's not something that happens overnight, it's years.
They're creating a living legacy, aren't they? And
Absolutely.
one of the most wonderful ones when foster caring is successful. I want to talk about the support that you can only talk about really about your agency, because one of the things that strikes me, and I've done quite a lot of talking with people, and I worked for a period of time when I left headship. I was a head teacher for 20 years, working as the interface in a local authority between foster carers, education and social workers. And I know that very different things happen in different authorities and with different agencies. They're not all as good as yours. But what sort of support do you give your potential foster carers? Let's talk about the support up to becoming a foster carer, and then let's talk about the support afterwards.
Okay. So for prospective foster carers, we do an assessment on them, and we'll get a social worker to do that. It's called a Form F assessment. And it's kind of like a mini biography of their life and everything they've been through. And it is where I would say we're supporting them is making sure that the assessment's done in a timely manner. We have to actually bring foster families to panel within 8 months, like regulation wise, but also having that approach while doing the assessment, that we are talking about very personal things to this family, and it can bring up some emotions, and it just explaining that to them.
Yes.
So I'm actually doing a Form F, my first Form F as a newly qualified social worker, and I'm having to go over all of the bereavement that this family have felt. And that's a huge topic. It brings up memories, it brings up emotions. But what we're actually assessing is, how do they manage those emotions? How have they come back? How is their resilience? Because what we don't want to do is put a child in their home and it causes a breakdown in the family home, or a breakdown in their emotions and how they're feeling. Looking after children is very emotional, and you do form attachment and bonds, but it's all about just managing those emotions around it. It's not saying don't have the emotion. It's just saying, how do we manage it? You know, how are you gonna feel if something in your family life goes wrong, and then you're looking after a foster child? How are you gonna manage that? So it's a vigorous assessment process, but I think it can actually be quite therapeutic, because you're actually going through, you're talking through some of the things that they've been through that they might never have discussed.
No.
And I think, yeah, I think if done well, it's actually quite a therapeutic experience for the fostering family, and quite empowering, because it feels great when you get to panel and they say the reasons why you're going to make a great foster carer. And we've really dug deep to find out what those reasons are.
So when you
Yeah.
talk about going to panel, again, isn't it interesting that every industry has its own language,
Yeah.
and people may not understand what is panel?
The panel is made up of a group of people that are independent to Banya, and they might be just from different walks of life. So you might have a teacher, a doctor, a foster carer, a social worker, sort of different professionals, different opinions, different backgrounds, and ideally a care experience person. And they basically read the Form F, and the social worker presents their Form F and says, this is why I think this family should be approved to be foster carers. And the panel discuss it and they say, yeah, this bit's great. This bit, maybe they need a bit more work, a bit more training. But pretty much 99.9% of the time, the family will be approved. It's quite negligent of an agency or local authority to bring a family to panel and they're not, because we should have picked it up on the assessment process earlier.
So I just want to make it clear that what you're saying is that it's not that they just let people go through and nobody fails, but actually if you've done your job, people are very well prepared.
Oh, there's a vigorous assessment. There's DBS, like criminal record check, medical, references, chronology, family tree. It's been picked up. It really should have been.
And I think that's important for people to know, particularly if they're considering this, that they recognise that, you're not going to quite want to know, about their underwear, but you are going to want to know pretty well everything else.
You become a public figure as a foster carer. Your home is now, it obviously is your home, but it has to have an open door to both the local authority and to the agency if both are involved.
Yeah.
And that's something that you have to take on board if you're going to be a foster carer.
Thank you. So now you've approved, and then what happens in terms of you getting your first child, or sometimes they're multiple children, aren't they?
So at Banya, what we do is we assign them a mentor, and that's usually an experienced foster carer that's in their local area, just for support and guidance. You really get some of the best support and guidance from other foster carers because they're doing it. And then we would assign them a supervising social worker, and the supervising social worker is responsible for looking after the family, the fostering family. So yeah, that's it really. We put them on our vacancy list, say, for the referral team to say this family are now on the vacancy list and you could match children with them. And then I'd say we have an extensive training program. That's something you do have to commit to as a foster carer. You have to do a certain amount of trainings every year. You have to stay really informed. Things change, laws, policies, language, it changes quite rapidly. You need to stay up to date. Foster carers that train the most usually deliver the best because they're staying informed. And then we have a 24-hour duty line. So any problems, foster carers can call us and a social worker will answer the phone. And then I could literally take up the rest of the session with some of the support. We have a safeguarding team that deals with any safeguarding issues. And then we also have a participation team that puts on a lot of events for our foster carers and our young people with the aim of improving our children's outcomes. Because I'd say that is our main aim, is for, if a child comes through our care, their outcomes get better, not worse.
Okay. We're going to go for a short break now, but I know that there are many children who are in foster homes where the situation is not as you describe, that they've not had the same support as foster parents or foster carers, and young people go through trials and tribulations. So I think it's important that we have that balance, that if you're with a great agency that does do their due diligence and actually engages in a really constructive way, that can be quite different to some of the experiences that some children will receive, depending on how they're matched and what's going on. But we're going to go to a short break, and when we come back, I want to talk about the experience of young people and the sort of things that can make it better for them, better outcomes in the short, medium and long term. So please don't go away. We'll be back in just a minute. Welcome back. So Thomas, I want to talk about outcomes. And that's the important thing, isn't it? What start we're giving these young people in life, how we nurture and help them get over the trauma and the difficulty. What sort of challenges are there for these young people that you've identified, to either for yourself or in terms of other young people that perhaps they have to deal with that the general run of the population don't? I mean, the obvious one is you're not with your family and you're not with your not with your parents but there'll be other challenges. What do you see as those?
I think it's, as obviously as you said, you're not with your family and you're not with the people that you know. So obviously that's the first hurdle when you come into care is building that level of trust.
Yes.
And I think that a large majority of children that or pe young people that come into care are going to have at some point level of trust issues
Mm-hmm.
throughout their lives. I mean, I say even as a successful placement, I still have some trust issues, and it's you can't. I wouldn't say you can. You got to also manage and understand what is going on and what has happened to you, and it's a really hard thing because a lot of children sometimes think, I know I thought it is that it is my fault. That
Yeah.
did I do something wrong? And it's about accepting that it's not your fault and there's nothing, you are just a victim of these situations. You are,
That's a really big thing, isn't it?
it is so, it is massive.
I know when there are divorces, for example, children will
Yeah.
often think, if I'd have been better, if I'd have done this or hadn't done that, then my mum and dad would have stayed together. But this must be ramped up with knobs on in the fact that they've been taken away. How can you help a young person, particularly if they're very small? How on earth do you help them make sense of that?
I think that you have to, one of the things that we do identify and we do try and look at is identifying what is best, what the child needs. Like
Mhm.
what does the child respond and get the best outcomes for the child, and how do we progress? So I think that obviously therapy is something that is always well looked into as a medium and to help, but it could also just be at being that person, a bit of reliability and stability in the household, so the child feels safe enough to express
Mhm.
who they are and how they are feeling, and that can build a lot of that can do world of wonders for a child.
Excellent. Thank you. But what other problems, Chib, what are the sort of problems that you have identified? There must be some patterns of particular issues that you have to take care of with foster carers because they're common patterns. Are there any of those?
Do you mean in terms of the foster carers having difficulties
I'm thinking now of the child. So, for
with the
example, if I
child?
put my head teacher's hat on, and
Mm,
we had a number of children who came from foster families, that
yeah.
often their education, for example, had been significantly disrupted,
Oh,
or
I
their
see.
early language development had been neglected because they were in a family that was perhaps dysfunctional. And I just wondered, what were the things that you talk to your foster carers about to look out for, because they're common patterns for many young people who've been through the care system?
Um, we're very, we definitely encourage our foster carers to be trauma informed.
Yes,
So to have the relevant training to understand what trauma means, because I think it's the word's thrown around a lot these
it
days.
is indeed, isn't it?
Yeah, so we need a clear definition of what that is and the impact that it can have on the child. But then you have to look holistically too at where this child might be coming from. So they might have experienced poverty, they might have experienced racism, they might have experienced homophobia, they might have experienced mental health. So there's a lot of intersectionality. But what I actually think one of my beliefs is is that we are all equipped to be able to look after any child.
Mm-hmm.
The things that can get us down and make us fail these children can be the systematic institutionalism behind some of how it works, and also about the level of care coming from higher up. So those things make huge differences. If we're having 11 years of austerity, that's impacting on our children in care. And that's something that is very difficult for us to work within. Whereas a child telling us how much pain they're experiencing, that's something we can work with, isn't it? Something we can try
If
to
they're
help.
able to articulate that.
Yes.
And I think so
Yeah.
often stuff is hidden, and
Yeah.
perhaps they're not in a position to communicate that
No,
effectively.
like you mentioned earlier, young child,
Yeah,
they're not going to be able to communicate or even understand what they've been through. But I don't think the emphasis in their care then has to be them understanding it. We need to
no,
make it child appropriate. So what
yeah,
we would just offer, nurturing, loving, like validating environment for them. Tom mentioned therapy. If they're a young child, it'd probably be something like play therapy. So yeah, that's what I mean by, yes, fostering throws up a lot of things that we need to work through, and that can be very sad to hear about, but we are able to do the work around that. But we need the means to be able to. We need more foster carers, and we need more people to understand what is actually going on and to just be more aware. That alone helps.
thank you. Tom, is there anything you want to add to that? Because I would like to then explore with you, we're talking about, the impact of, these are my words, not yours, but of policy and financial support and so on. But before we do, Tom, anything you want to add to that in terms of the particular issues that foster children will face that other children perhaps don't?
I think that it could be a case of one thing that is quite common is possibly like bullying at school is something that a lot of foster children face, feeling obviously because they are not living a not a a normal, I don't like using that word, but normal, a predictable lifestyle, then they feel like a bit of an outcast. So you've
Yes.
got to explain that to them. And obviously, as you said, as we've discussed, it's the acceptance of what they've been through and making them understand that it's not their fault. And how do we go from there and how can we move them forward? One of the things that is quite a common thing is, as you said, disruption in their education.
Yeah.
So they may be a few years back in their reading, or they may struggle in some situations. So that might mean they need extra education and then they catch up, and many is in the correct environment, and
Yeah.
they feel supported and cared for in the household. They will catch up and they will flourish. The resilience of these children is immense.
I was talking to somebody the other day, and we were talking about, people who've been through the care system as adults, and talking about. I said to them, their superpower is that they're survivors and they've got resilience, that they have the capacity to adapt, in a way that many children have never been expected to and haven't grown those muscles, if you like. But before we go to the break, I want to talk about the powers that be, the policies, the decision making, the financing, and the impact that that's been having, and what you think the answers are. And I don't know that it's just more money. It's got to be money targeted in the right way, I suspect.
Yeah.
So, are you going to start that with us? You're the.
I feel very passionately about this topic. I think before we get to policy, we kind of get to philosophy and values, isn't it? So we've had a recent government change. So I think there will be a shift just into the philosophy and the values that we're coming from. So under the Conservatives, they have more neoliberal approach where they want to reduce what they call a dependency on the state and kind of let people deal with their issues more independently and less interference from the state. But that can become problematic for the social services because I think personally what that does is it doesn't place enough resources in preventative care. So it's kind of like, let them get on with it. You know, we're giving them freedom, their liberty. That's great. But then very heavy-handed when things go wrong. Oh, you've got this wrong. We're going to remove the child. We're going to put you in jail. You know, you're kind of, yeah, I just think that emphasis, and I did my master's in social work, so I did 2 placements for Croydon Local Authority. So I've worked under these social policies,
Yes.
and we're taught to really critique them, and some of it, I, everything can be a double-edged sword. So we were always told to empower the individual to live independently, which is great. I've really seen the value of that, of getting people to live independently in their homes and to feel empowered. But the other side to that is we don't actually have any resources to help them. So let's empower them so we don't actually have to, it's not empowering somebody if you're not giving them the right support, if that makes sense. So it's like, yes, let's get this independence, but independence can be within the community and within us signposting them to the right services that are there to support them. Sadly, after COVID and the cost of living crises, those services don't exist. There's actually nowhere for social workers to be signposting. And the charity sector have taken on a lot of responsibility, food banks, you've got Age UK, you've got Mind, some fantastic organizations. But a lot of what they're doing, in my opinion, the government should be doing. We can't just leave it in the hands of people doing good. There has to be some structures in place for us to be able to protect society's most vulnerable.
Fatima and Fatima's UK campaign, which is very much, I'm part of that, vice chair, and Fatima has been on the programme a number of times. But one of her sayings is you can either put a fence at the top of the cliff or have an ambulance at the bottom. And I think that really graphically describes that either you put in preventative measures and create a living and loving environment where people thrive and can become independent, or you don't, and then you have all of the social, health, crime, homelessness, all of those things, which then cost far more than it would if you put in preventative measures and enabled these people to live happy, successful lives.
Yes.
But it's always short-sighted.
Yeah. And too much emphasis, I think, is put on the social services to sort this out. But we actually need all areas, like you just said, to be sorted. So healthcare, education, social care, they're all interlinked. So I might have a client and there's only so much I can do as a social worker. If they don't have a house or their housing situation is really bad, we're not really going to make that much progress. And that's out of my hands.
We're going to go to our last break. And when we come back, I want to talk about the time when young people leave care, because the statistics are stark. So please don't go away. We'll be back in just a moment. Welcome back. Children have to leave care in the UK by the age of 18, is my understanding. And within 2 years, a third of those young people are homeless. And some of those may be sofa surfing, some of them on the streets. But I think when we look at those statistics, a third of young people in prison under the age of 25 have had experience of the care system. And I think one of the challenges is that society can make the assumption that those young people are inherently bad, when I believe that actually they are failed by the system, and that so they get themselves into challenges because they haven't got the life skills, the confidence to stand up and to do things differently. What's your view, Thomas?
Yeah, it's a very good point, and it is a sad number to see that many children coming out of care and then either in homelessness, in prison, and it would give you the impression of this negative impression of like foster care being bad, because if they're in
Yeah.
foster care, then they end up in prison. Not the case. I don't think that's true. Going from it's that transitional support
Yeah.
from you're in care, you are a child, we will take care of you, to you're an adult, go sort it all out. There is not, whereas most people do not have like, live with their parents, especially nowadays. A lot of young people live with their parents till their late, early to mid 20s,
If not
because
later. I think the average these days is something like 30, 27.
even so, exactly 27. So you're asking an 18-year-old to come out of education, and then they need to find a job that
Mhm.
supports a home and transport maybe, and do all of this, and for an 18-year-old, it's I couldn't have done it with 18. I was, like I said, I was very, very lucky and I was very, very fortunate. As soon as I turned 18, I went from a foster placement to a tenancy agreement with my foster carers. So I basically rented a room from them.
So you stayed in
Yeah.
situ.
And I didn't move out until I was 26.
And is that a common thing for
No.
young people to do?
For young people that aren't in the foster system, possibly, but for people in the foster system, what the room and I hate saying it like this, but the room and having a foster placement is a level of income for the foster parents.
What
I
I
know.
would, mm, what I, yeah,
But
what I would add, Tom brought up some very valid points, and it can be a bit of like a cliff edge at 18. But
Yes.
the government did introduce in 2012 staying put, which I think was a great idea, and it's I think it's doing effective work, where a foster child can stay in the care of their foster carer till the age of 21. And at
Right.
first, they made it for kids that were staying in higher education, but now it's for all kids. And I think it works really well. And, that is actually a good outcome for a child. But Tom mentioned that some foster carers literally cannot afford to keep that child. And it's not that they don't want to. So they've got to make that heartbreaking decision at 18, like, oh, actually, I can't keep you. But there's a real like diversity in young
Mm.
people as well, because some are ready to leave at 18 and some
Yeah.
really actually want to be independent. And I think what our responsibility is as an agency and the local authority as well is to help them to build a community of people so
Yes.
that when they leave care, they have a similar support unit to a family. And that can be the foster carer, it can be the foster carer's children, it can be a social worker, it can be another care experience person. And I think we've got to help them to make those connections and also let them know what they're entitled to. There's a lot of things that you're entitled to if you've just left care. Like you can get help to pay for your passport, your driving license, you can get a cheaper gym membership, and it's sometimes just making sure that these young people have that knowledge. Yeah, and just building relationships with them. I can be a bit removed sometimes from the children because
Mhm.
of sort of my managerial responsibilities, but the reason I'm doing everything is because of them. So I'm trying to build relationships with them and them to know who I am and them to have my phone number and for them when they're an adult to still see that Banya is, their extended family, and that we'd never close our door on them, and we love it when they come back and they tell us how they're doing.
I think that's wonderful. And I think the corollary of that is that we hear of young people being moved multiple times, that with foster carers who quite frankly are in it for the wrong reason and things have not gone right. And I think that's one of the things that really strikes me in the work that we're doing with Fatima's UK campaign, is there's such a wide spread, that there isn't a one size fits all, there isn't a one situation fits all, that we're dealing with people in a huge range of issues, a huge range of different agencies, some who are great like yours, others who are less so. And I think that one of the things that I hope this program will do, this video, will raise awareness, because we are all, as a society, corporate parents of those youngsters who come into care. So if you're a business, providing meaningful, supported, employment is a way that you can help. If you have an organization that can offer some support and help, that's just perhaps a little bit extra than you would do to the general public, then that's a really good thing.
Yeah.
We're coming towards the end of the program now, and one of the things that I'd like to ask is, if people were, I realize that this program goes out all over the world, but if people were interested in becoming foster carers, where should they go and look? And specifically for you, but if you not in your geographical location, where would they go and get information, do you think, about this?
So that would be, if they can, I'd say, look up if they're interested in fostering, I would say you can give Banya, you can give us a call us, or online on our website. But if you're not looking at an agency, I suggest possibly the local authority as well, because
and that would be true whichever country you're in. There must be a local authority or a local council or whatever they're called, that would perhaps be a starting point and say, I'm interested, what do I need to do?
Yeah, I agree with Tom. I think it depends where you're based.
Yeah.
But I would have a look on the internet, and I would do some research just into what the role of the foster carer is and what the expectations of that role is. And perhaps if you can, get on social media, see where there's some communities of foster carers talking, because they will be talking online, and ask them questions. What's your experience like? What would you recommend I did? Look at agencies, look at the local authorities, see what their values are. Are they similar to yours? And see what support you would be getting from joining them.
That's great advice. What's Banya's website address?
www.banya.co.uk.
And how do you spell Banya?
Banya.
So give it again so people have got an opportunity to remember it.
B for Bravo, A for Alpha, N for November, Y for Yankee, A for Alpha again.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. So thank you very much for talking to me. And it's been a really interesting conversation. We could go on all day, but it's time for us to finish. But thank you very much. Thank you for listening. I really appreciate the fact that you joined me. I'd love to hear from you and know what you think. You can contact me either through my email, which is ginagardinerandfriends@gmail.com, or you can join me through the website of Brushwood Media Network.com. And there are free Apple and Android apps. You can listen not only to the live shows, but also to the archive. Just want to let you know about another project that we've got going, which is Gina Gardiner Showcases Tomorrow's Talent. So if you're a great musician, or you know a great musician who's not yet been discovered, and they would like to come on the show, it's a very different style of show. You can play 4 of your tracks. There's a form to fill in, and that form is Gina Gardiner tomorrowstalent.com. Fill the form in, and you too could be in front of over 3 million people. Thank you very much for joining us. Take care now. Bye-bye.